Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast, a breaking news edition here on Labor Day because Tennessee football, Ryan Callahan has picked up yet another big win on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, this is definitely another big one after Tristan Keys obviously committed just less than a week ago, and now Tennessee has flipped another player from another SEC school, third time in less than 2 weeks that they've done that. But this time it's four-star edge rusher Hezekiah Harris out of Huntsville, Alabama. You're area the country you're plenty familiar with, Ben. Tennessee has stayed on Hezekiah Harris for a long time. He had been committed to Auburn for more than a year. And despite that, Tennessee never gave up on him, continued to pursue him, make him a huge priority, and got him on campus 4 times this year, including an official visit back in June. And Tennessee's persistence pays off in the form of a flip. They beat out Auburn and Florida for him. He took official visits to all 3 schools in late May and June before making his final decision. After those official visits, he had talked about taking things into the fall. Had acted like this might be a kind of long, drawn-out process where he would probably attend games at all 3 schools this season, continue to weigh his options, but got to around the beginning of his senior season and decided he was ready to go ahead and make a final decision. And despite multiple factors working in Auburn's favor, he was an in-state player. His older brother Malachi, an offensive lineman, transferred to Auburn as a preferred walk-on earlier this year after starting his career at Austin Peay. So there were multiple reasons Auburn, I think, felt optimistic about holding on to him at times, despite the fact that he was still taking visits. But Tennessee did a great job in this recruitment, led by LaVorn Harbin, the outside linebackers coach, and just never gave up on him. Always felt that had a good chance of stealing him away, and sure enough, it turned out that way. So huge win for the Vols, and really addresses a big need that we can get into this in a minute, but Tennessee really did have a need for another edge in this class. Even though if you look on the surface, it looks like Tennessee's got a few edges in this class. I'm not really sure that was the case before this commitment. So for Tennessee to get a highly ranked guy at that position, I think this is definitely a big deal for Tennessee to win this one.
Yes, Hezekiah Harris is from Jemison High School there in Huntsville, which is about 20 minutes from where I graduated high school and where my parents still live. We can go ahead and dive into that right now. So you do view him as a true edge rusher. Is there any potential for him ballooning and maybe growing into a defensive end at some point? I guess you could never rule that out with high school edge rushers.
Yeah, you definitely can't rule that out, but he's got the prototypical length and athleticism to definitely play the Leo position in Tennessee's defense. He is up to about 235, but I think that's that's a pretty safe weight as long as he doesn't gain too much more before he gets on campus. I think that's a guy you can pretty safely project to the Leo position in Tennessee's defense. So yeah, 6'5.5" or so, 235 at last check, and that's that. He's a good sized kid, good long arms, and all the things you look for in an elite pass rusher. He certainly has them. So still a little bit of room to develop, I think, as a player. As a lot of these guys are, you're kind of looking for the traits a lot of times with these guys coming out of high school, and you develop them when you get them on campus. So I'm sure he's not going to be a finished product when he gets on campus, but definitely a guy that Tennessee's pretty excited about and had stayed on for a long time. But yeah, because they had some guys who are currently rated edges in this class, I think some people might have looked at it and said, well, why are they still after, why do they still want Joel Wyatt as an edge? Why is Hezekiah Harris still a priority? Well, I think the main reason for that, those other guys might not play edge. CJ Edwards, I think, is the other guy in the class who probably projects as a Leo. Zach Groves may have already outgrown that position. He's up around 260 pounds, maybe a little more than that at the start of his senior season. So I think everyone envisions him being a guy who plays with his hand on the ground all the time at the college level at this point, and just kind of has naturally ballooned into a bigger bodied type of guy this year, and is probably going to be a 5 technique or if he keeps growing, maybe even a 3 technique at Tennessee by the time he settles in and spends a year in the weight room and things like that. And then you've got a similar guy somewhat in Kedrick Golston, the second, the son of former NFL defensive tackle Kedrick Golston, and he is around the same weight as Hezekiah Harris, but without quite the same length. So I think he just has a body type that you think will continue to put on more weight once he gets into a college strength and conditioning program, and probably ends up being more of a 5 technique at the strong side defensive end, if I had to guess, but could still play the Leo position in some situations. So yeah, that's that's kind of a wait and see situation. But because you didn't have anyone besides CJ Edwards in this class who was a surefire edge rusher, I think it was important for Tennessee to get a guy like this, and certainly to get someone of Hezekiah Harris's stature as a prospect, top 100 nationally in the 24/7 Sports Composite, a top 247 prospect in 24/7 Sports rankings. To get a guy like that and to beat out a couple good SEC programs for him, that's a really nice win for Tennessee. And again, give them credit for reading the situation correctly. A lot of people might say, hey, an Auburn commitment from Alabama. Auburn's been recruiting pretty well under Hugh Freeze before this year, certainly. Why stay after a guy from Huntsville who's got his brother at Auburn? That doesn't seem like a situation where a guy's likely to flip. But Tennessee, I think, had the right read on this one from the start and did a good job. And, this wasn't a situation where they were wasting their time on a guy who was never going to flip. They, just like with Tristan Keys, they saw the situation correctly, stayed on him, and their persistence paid off in the end.
Florida also right there in his final three when he made his final decision here on Monday afternoon. And those are two programs, Florida and Auburn, right now, that not winning as much on the field as their fans would like, although Auburn was very impressive in their win over Baylor. But on the recruiting trail, Billy Napier and Gus Malzahn's on the brain after his win over Alabama over the weekend as the offensive coordinator at Florida State, in his tweet that it felt like old times. But Hugh Freeze, both of those head coaches right now are doing a really good job on the recruiting trail. So this is a very, very impressive win. And based off of how you kind of went through and did a great job of laying out the status of Tennessee's other edge rushers or potential edge rushers in this class, I mean, it seems like it was more of a need than we maybe realized. And I wonder, going off of that, with it being more of a need maybe than we realized within the moment or the build up to his announcement, there's also the aspect, and you just touched on this a little bit. I mean, he's a top 100 overall player in the country, essentially. We at 24/7 have him ranked as the number 108 player in the country, the 12th best edge rusher, and the 8th best player in the state of Alabama out of Huntsville. So I imagine, as you mentioned a little bit, that there's the dynamic of he's a really good football prospect as well.
Yeah, no question. And that's why Tennessee stayed on him. I mean, this is a guy Tennessee offered back in December 2022. So you think about how long this recruitment goes back. You're talking almost 3 years. So they offered him as a freshman in high school, one of his very first offers, I believe, at the time. And just kind of stayed on him. Got him on campus once earlier in the recruiting process, I believe, and then made it back earlier this year for Tennessee's first junior day back in January. And that's when it became apparent that the Vols were really going to try to stay in this one, really had a realistic shot. Of course, at that time, the Leo board for Tennessee looked pretty healthy. Had a lot of guys in play at that time. They got several of them on campus for either junior days in January or spring practices. You thought you had a good number of options there. They got the early commitment from CJ Edwards before he even got on campus. So they had some good possibilities there. And you thought, hey, they may end up with 3 really good edges in this class. And the part about this, we still don't know, what's Joel Wyatt going to be? We don't know yet long term. Is he, he's obviously trying to play safety at the next level. And that sounds like that's where he's going to start off. But he's a long, big framed guy who maybe has a chance to grow a little bit. So we'll see how he develops physically. But we know Tennessee initially recruited him as an edge too. So you got some interesting body types, a lot of different pieces, kind of a variety of guys. Zach Grove's a big, long guy too, but he's just kind of put on that weight a little bit early. That you didn't really expect him to have this type of offseason, but has spent the whole offseason kind of focusing more on football. Didn't play basketball this past year, I think, and that allowed him to kind of put on that weight naturally. And now he's looking like a guy that's going to be more of a 5 technique again, or maybe a 3 technique if he keeps growing. And so you've got Kedrick Golson, like I said, that maybe could be an edge, but aside from that, CJ Edwards may end up being the other true Leo in this class. We'll have to. I mean, Joel Wyatt to me is a total wild card. You just don't know how that's going to go, but just worth filing away that Tennessee had in the back of their minds for a while that he could be a Leo. So maybe you still end up with 3 edges in this class, but there's a chance it's only a couple right now. And to get a guy like Hezekiah Harris to continue that impressive lineage they've had at that position, and they've done a tremendous job of recruiting that position over the past few years. Obviously, Caleb Herring and going back to the 2022 class with Josh Josephs and James Pierce and Pierce a first-round pick, of course, and now you got Jordan Ross getting in there in his second year in the program, and some talented young guys behind him, including Christian Gass. We'll see if Emmanuel Okoye turns into the type of player that they thought he could be coming out of high school. So you've got some impressive wins that they've continued to stack at that position year after year. So this just continues that trend, and it's a really important position to get right. So that's why I think Tennessee has continued to make it such a big priority, and that's why you want to make sure you try to land someone like a Hezekiah Harris every year if possible, because you just can't have enough pass rushers. Even if they do outgrow the Leo position somehow in some cases, you just can't have enough of those guys that can get after the quarterback in college football and any level of football these days. And so, yeah, for them to go to Alabama and get a player of this caliber, pretty impressive win there for Tennessee, and give them credit again for playing the long game. I mean, again, this is a recruitment that's gone nearly 3 years, and a guy committed to Auburn for more than a year. So that's always impressive to me when you can stay after a guy like that and steal him away from a program that obviously is a big rival for Tennessee in recruiting, and a program that you've gone head-to-head with a number of times over the years, and it doesn't always work out well. And this one is going to go Tennessee's way.
Jordan Ross, another Alabama native that Tennessee has been able to land at that Leo position. Again, you just touched on it a little bit, but I haven't asked you directly. What do you think is the biggest reason that led to Hezekiah Harris's decision to flip from Auburn to Tennessee? Do you believe it is because of how long Tennessee has been recruiting him? Do you think that's the main reason, as you just mentioned a moment ago?
Yeah, I think it was a few things. I think definitely the persistence in recruiting him. He definitely came back to that a lot in talking about his interest in Tennessee. They did a really good job there. Lavorne Harbin has a pretty strong relationship with him at this point, and has done a nice job in his recruitment, for a while now, and certainly since he got promoted to outside linebackers coach earlier this year. I think also just the fit. I think guys are starting to see now that Tennessee's producing NFL edge rushers, that they're putting guys in already in the NFL in James Pierce's case, and then Josh Josephs looks like he's well on his way to having a shot to play in the NFL. One of the top graded edge rushers in the country, according to Pro Football Focus last year. Really good start to the season Saturday against Syracuse. You see Caleb Herring and Jordan Ross coming up behind them. Obviously, Hezekiah Harris spent time with Jordan Ross during his time on his official visit to Knoxville. So here's another Alabama guy, a 5-star coming out of high school, saying good things about Tennessee, about how he thinks he's going to be a big part of their defensive plans in the next couple of years. You see that, and it starts to look like a good defensive fit. And obviously, there have been some questions around Auburn too, frankly, that that looks like they may end up having a chance to have a better year than some people might have expected 6 months ago. But they, there's been some questions about that program. So Tennessee looks like a pretty stable program at this point. Got a lot of things going for them. A chance to play for some good coaches on that defensive side of the ball, including Harbin. But Rodney Garner's always been involved with the defensive line a little bit. Tim Banks obviously doing a good job with that defense. So I think just excited about his opportunity in that defense as well. But yeah, Tennessee's just the effort they put into recruiting him and how much of a priority they made him, I think was a big part of that. And just, and also, Tennessee's pretty close to home too. Auburn's the in-state school, but Tennessee not far down the road. And I think just felt comfortable there. And again, started to really like it the more he went there. 4 visits in less than 6 months is a lot to spend on a campus at a school that you're not committed to. So he obviously kept making the trip and just kind of developed a good comfort level with Tennessee. And I don't believe he's even been to a home game yet. Went to the spring game back in April, but clearly liked the environment every time he was around, both during the summer when things were quiet and at that spring game where he kind of got a feel for the fan base. I think he always was impressed by just the environment on campus and just sort of everything Tennessee had to offer on top of all that.
It's an easy drive from Knoxville to Huntsville. I can attest. I've made it 1,000 times. It feels like at this point could make the drive in my sleep. My only advice to Hezekiah would be to avoid Chattanooga in the afternoon, work traffic on any day of the week, quite frankly, but certainly on Friday. You either got to go mid-morning after the morning work traffic, or after work traffic and make the drive at night. That's honestly now the best time to make the drive to avoid the Chattanooga traffic, as so many Tennesseans know.
4 hours or so, right?
Maybe with traffic, yes. Without traffic, it's about 3.5. So
Yeah.
it's a real easy drive if you can avoid that Chattanooga traffic, which seems like a miracle to avoid the Chattanooga traffic these days. Hezekiah Harris has flipped his commitment from Auburn to Tennessee, and there's still plenty more to discuss in the wake of that development on the other side of this quick timeout here on the GoVols 24/7 podcast. Welcome back into the GoVols 24/7 podcast, a breaking news edition, because four-star edge rusher Hezekiah Harris from Huntsville, Alabama, has flipped his commitment from Auburn to Tennessee here on Labor Day. And before we jump back into our discussion, I do need to encourage you very quickly, if you wouldn't mind going in and leaving us a review wherever you find our GoVols 24/7 podcast. And first and foremost, we would certainly appreciate if you would make sure you are subscribed wherever you find our podcast, whether that's on Apple, Spotify, or elsewhere. These podcasts are also being posted in video form on YouTube. So if you haven't found us on YouTube just yet at GoVols 24/7, make sure you go in, you subscribe to us. And the reviews are more of the cherry on top. That does help us in a big way, but subscribing helps us even more. And for those of you who do enjoy our content, I feel like, do a good job throughout the year, regardless of the Tennessee sport. Do a good job of pumping these out year round. So if you like our content, make sure you turn on those notifications, because you never know when a breaking news Tristan Keys video is going to drop on YouTube, and you never know when a breaking news Hezekiah Harris commitment video podcast is going to drop as well. So we greatly appreciate all the support, and that's how you can help us in a big way.
And while we're at it, Ben, definitely want to remind people to take advantage of our big sale that ends just tomorrow, actually. So a little more than a day left to take advantage of our big season kickoff sale, 75% off an annual subscription. So our biggest sale of the year. Don't miss out on this one. If you have ever had any passing thought of joining GoVols 24/7, now is the time to do it. But definitely a great time to do that with the season now underway, and obviously plenty of great recruiting coverage just like this, and plenty more on the site. Ben does a great job covering baseball and basketball, so year round, lots of good stuff that you want to get access to on GoVols 24/7. And now is the perfect time to do that. If you want Paramount Plus included, you can also sign up for a monthly subscription at full price, and that will give you instant access to Paramount Plus, which is a tremendous value on top of your GoVols 24/7 subscription. So join today and take advantage of that sale.
Yeah, I feel like Patrick does as creative of a job covering the football team as anybody on the beat.
In an era when it's hard to find good coverage that's unique,
yeah.
Patrick puts out some really unique stuff. That X's and O's piece that comes out each week, that thing to me is worth the price of admission alone, but he does a lot of good stuff.
1,000%. You will not find a more detailed breakdown of the matchups going into a game each weekend as well, and it's year round. He consistently is the only guy that makes the trip to the NFL Combine to talk to Tennessee's players that are going to get drafted, and that's just a small example of his creative coverage. That again, I feel like he does as well of a job as anybody on the beat. You get Ryan's recruiting coverage. Tennessee basketball will be hosting one of the top players in the country this week on a visit. Tennessee baseball is going to be ramping up their visitors as well. Fall baseball starts this month. Basketball practice started last week, so all of my coverage with baseball and basketball to go along with the football coverage. Maria Cornelius's women's basketball coverage. Everybody's pumped up about Kim Caldwell, what she's doing on the recruiting trail. In her second season on Rocky Top. Looks like they're going to have another fun team. So in-depth coverage year-round of all the sports, not just football, GoVols 24/7. And right now you can take advantage of our best offer of the year. That's enough about us. Hezekiah Harris, we kind of went out of order than we typically do here on our reaction podcasts when somebody commits to Tennessee. So you did a great job at breaking down kind of the state of Tennessee's recruitment of edge rushers. What about the defense as a whole? What do you feel in terms of boxes that have been checked off? Where do you feel Tennessee has things covered? And as we really get into the thick of in-season recruiting, what do you feel like Tennessee still has left to address on the defensive side of the football?
Yeah, honestly, not a lot with this pickup. You know, people have asked about Tristan Givens, another edge rusher that Tennessee has been involved with for a while. They lost out to Texas A&M in that battle over the summer, but still, you know, they've stayed in contact there. I always felt like that was kind of a lower percentage chance. At least that's the feel I've gotten the past couple months of flipping him. compared to Hezekiah Harris. But we'll see how that one plays out, and if Tennessee tries to stay in that one this fall, given that Harris is now part of Tennessee's class. So they're probably capable of being done at the Leo position. You don't have to add anyone else there at this point. And then in other positions, it kind of looks that way too. You got linebacker. That's a really strong position group in this class, obviously led by Braden Rouse and TJ White, a couple of top 100 prospects nationally there on 24/7 Sports. And then the secondary class, I think kind of an underrated secondary class in a way. There's not a single really highly ranked player among that group, but some really nice prospects. And we'll see if Joel Wyatt ends up being part of that group, I should say. It could be you might have a highly ranked safety in there if he ends up playing safety in college, but that's certainly an open question at this point. But that cornerback group, a really intriguing class. I think they've got some nice pieces in Javonte Smith and Jamian Theodore and Zay Anderson, some nice athletes back there that they found in state. So they're just about done, I would say, on defense. The defensive line is kind of the one position group where I think they still might look to add. We'll see that they've continued to recruit J.J. Finch, the Alabama commitment out of Indiana. That there's some other guys they've stayed in touch with. We'll see what kind of surfaces there this season. That's a position group where I wouldn't be shocked if some other offers went out this fall, or they maybe circle back to some guys that are committed to other schools, or sometimes guys will play their way into bigger opportunities that committed to a quote unquote lower level school before their senior season. So there could be some opportunities like that surface on the defensive line this season. Junior college guys, always a possibility. They went for Jamal Wallace a couple years ago. They certainly could add someone on the defensive line through one of those avenues. So probably getting close to capacity, but defensive line, the one position I'm kind of watching the closest as we get deeper into the season.
What about on the offensive side of the ball, or just the recruiting class overall? I mean, do you feel like everything's pretty much covered at this point, and maybe it's more about best available, or I mean, even now at this point, now that we've recorded, I mean, Savion Hyder's come off the board, Tristan Keys finally did something. Even those big time prospects Tennessee was after have made decisions, at least here in the short term. It kind of almost feels, at least from my vantage point, that even though there are a couple of recruitments here and there, it seems kind of like best available, because it does seem like almost all of the hay is in the barn at this point.
Well, there are two glaring absences in this class. Obviously, you don't have a tight end right now, and you don't have a running back. Now, one of those, it looks like, may or may not be addressed in this class. Running back, it seems like, is one they wouldn't. It's very possible they could just go to the transfer portal in the offseason, just like they did with Star Thomas, who looks like a nice find out of Duke, obviously, this year. They could easily go to the portal to add a guy, especially because you've got an intriguing freshman like DeJuan Morris, who's probably going to demand a bigger role if he keeps on his current trajectory. And then you're probably going to have, Deshaun Bishop and Peyton Lewis coming back next year. So that's a pretty good situation. Might need to just kind of try to find the right fit for that group now that you've missed on a Savion Hyder type. So unless something changes there, that's a position where I wouldn't be shocked if they don't sign one in this class. Tight end, it seems like there is still a desire to sign a high school tight end. And that may be partly, again, because of what Tennessee has at that position and coming back. You've got Ethan Davis in his third year now playing a bigger role. You've got a talented pair of freshmen in Desan Brame and Jack Van Dorselaer. You've got Cole Harrison also working his way into the mix a little bit more. So they've got a few pretty good options there. If you bring in a transfer that expects to play, that might kind of rock the boat a little bit more, as opposed to bringing in a high school guy who maybe can just work his way in over time. So that's I think part of the explanation for why they're after a Kentucky commitment, Lincoln Watkins out of Michigan, who seems to be their main focus of that position at this point. But we'll see if anyone else surfaces at tight end. And then offensive line, we'll see if any additional options at interior line surface. I think they're pretty good at tackle now with the addition of Kamari Blair a couple weeks ago. But now, can they missed out on Darius Gray, the 5-star out of Virginia. So can they find another interior lineman for this class? That would kind of fill out this offensive line class a little bit better. And then on top of all that, just the big picture view of recruiting, everyone's expecting a move to a 105 scholarship roster in the near future, probably next year, if I had to guess. So with that being said, you've got more flexibility than usual. If Tennessee added another tight end and another defensive lineman, that alone would put you at 27 commitments. They're at 25 right now. We see a lot of teams at, close to 30 or 30 plus in some cases. I think Tennessee's, certainly open to going beyond 25 and approaching 30 at least. we'll see how big this class gets. But the bottom line is you have more flexibility than usual, assuming that move to a 105 scholarship situation goes into effect next year. So with everyone kind of anticipating that, how much will Tennessee kind of just look around, as you said, for kind of best available players? Will we see them go after a guy at a position that looks done just because there's a chance to add another good player that, maybe is willing to come in and kind of play his way into a role at a developmental guy that they find that's interesting? Maybe an in-state player surfaces. That's, I think, where you're looking a lot of times for those kind of back end of the roster type guys. You need to look in-state probably for those first and foremost, for a guy who's willing to stick around a couple years and play his way into a bigger role. So I'm interested in seeing, will anyone like that surface at any other position where Tennessee can maybe not take a chance on a guy, but say, hey, let's see if we can get this guy in here, a guy that we couldn't afford to take a flyer on in the past. Maybe we take him this year and see what he turns into over the next couple of years. That type of player could be a fit for Tennessee and a lot of programs looking for additional bodies on the roster.
On the other big thing this time of year, in-season recruiting, is making sure you hold on to your current commitments. Have there been any early traction with committed players flirting with other schools? Did anybody make any week one visits or any visits to note that we're aware of here in the month of September of current Tennessee commits flirting with other schools?
Yeah, not that we're aware of right now. It's been pretty much status quo to this point. Carson Snead obviously flipped to North Carolina last month. That was kind of the last guy that looked like he was a little bit shaky in Tennessee's class. So we'll see if anything surfaces. I know there are some other guys, or there are some guys being recruited still by other schools, and a lot of guys are kind of taking the view of, well, I'm solid right now, but I'm not ruling out anything in the future, because let's face it, in the NIL era, all it takes is one phone call for something to get real. That previously was not a concern. So I think most players are kind of being realistic about it these days and saying, I'm firmly committed right now. We'll see if anything changes in the future, but I don't have any reason to look around at this point. And that's sort of the what everyone's saying at this point. So I think they're in good shape, as good a shape as you can be in. Obviously we'll be watching Faison Brandon, Tristan Keys. Even Tristan Keys says he's done. He said last week he's shutting it down, not planning to take any more visits, but he's the number one wide receiver in the country. So we'll see. Will he pop up on a campus somewhere this season? You certainly can't rule it out, but I think Tennessee's done a good job in that one to where that's at least possible that he does shut it down. So we'll kind of have to wait and see throughout the season. But I think Tennessee, based on what we know right now, there's no reason to really worry about anyone. But as you said, it's recruiting. You always got to keep an eye on guys during the season. They had to fight off some teams for some guys last year. A couple of years ago, you had to worry about Travis Smith and some others last year during the season. It seems like all is quiet at this point, but sometimes that's just the calm before the storm. So we'll kind of wait and see.
There's going to be somebody, if not a second somebody. It's recruiting. It happens every year.
And when you've got as good a class as Tennessee does, when you have a class as good as Tennessee's right now, and this, based on the class calculator on 24/7 Sports, it looks like they'll be at number 7 unless something changes before this is announced. So to have a number 7 class in the country, you obviously got some good players that other teams are going to covet, and you got to hold on to those guys all with everything you can, and that means some other schools are definitely going to at least make a run at somebody. So yeah, you're right. It's going to happen at some point. It's just a matter of who it's going to be and how many.
Before we get out of here and let you get a sip of water, where can people find you and your coverage of all things Tennessee football recruiting?
Yeah, GoVols247.com. Lots of coverage on the Hezekiah Harris commitment and plenty more. Obviously, Tennessee getting ready for ETSU, coming off that season opener. Good coverage of wrapping up Saturday's game, looking ahead to game 2, and some injury notes to take care of this week as well. Some players, some key players already out for Tennessee. So lots of good stuff on the team front and on the recruiting front. We've been out at some high school games. We got some updates on some of Tennessee's top in-state targets and commitments that we've already seen the past couple weeks. So lots of good stuff and plenty more on the way at GoVols247.com.
For Ryan Callahan, I'm Ben McKee. This has been another edition of the GoVols247 Podcast, a breaking news edition because 4-star edge rusher Hezekiah Harris from Huntsville, Alabama, has flipped his commitment from Auburn to Tennessee.